Okay, welcome to episode 146 of an Evolving Man podcast. Today I'm delighted to be speaking to Ian Keys. Ian started boarding school at age 11 and left with no qualifications, wondering ever since what had gone wrong. After a mix of early jobs, he spent 5 years in a pupil referral unit supporting teenagers excluded from school. He later stumbled into a business that let him keep working with young people in varied settings, from forest school to neurodivergent groups in schools and national level athletes. Recently qualified as a counsellor, he brings a lived understanding of how schooling can wound and how people can learn to write a different story for themselves. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you, Piers. Great to be talking to you.
Yeah, yeah. So we've obviously connected a bit through the documentary. You were part of the ambassadors group. You are part of the ambassadors group, and then we were chatting about neurodiversity at the conference earlier on this month.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, oh, that's a great conversation. So I said, do you want to come on the podcast? And you're like, yes. So bless you. Thank you for coming.
No, great pleasure. Great pleasure. It's something I feel very passionate and strongly about.
Yeah, me too, me too. How I always begin the conversation is, what's got you passionate about this? What's got you into this work now, Ian?
Well, I think it's around, I think I've experienced really viscerally how it can go right and how it can go wrong. And the bits when it goes wrong uh, are really hard, and they have a long-lasting effect. Um, and it's taking me a lifetime to work it out, really. And I'm still having eureka moments around it. Um, I've tried to expose myself to uh, as much of this as I can.
Mhm.
Uh, Not having a degree, not having a teacher's qualification. I haven't been a teacher, I haven't been in a school, but I have worked in various settings a lot of the time with teenagers, particularly who either are really struggling, or actually with the athletes I've worked with, the opposite. They're really high achieving young people. But again, they also have their struggles. So it feels that it's that moment of witnessing for myself and others how things can go well and how things can go really wrong. And trying to think about what we can do to support people who are adults who have experienced that, and what we can do in small ways to make changes right the way through a child's life, and what we might want from policymakers around what changes should be happening.
Mhm.
I mean, the depressing part of that is that I've been reading around this for 30 years. Most of the books were written in the 70s. We've known for a long time how this could be done better.
Mhm.
And it'd be really interesting to explore with your peers around why that's not happening. Maybe that's a separate conversation, but it's interesting that there are countries in the world where things are very different, and there seem to me, I've not experienced it, but they seem a shining light in how it could be, um, for the children that might be struggling, and also the children that might be naturally academic and will go on to be doctors and professors. And so there's a way of trying to find a way that everybody can come out of school, um, feeling that they can contribute positively, um, is what I'm really fascinated about.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you. And what, if we begin with the high level, what have you seen? What's the thread that you get a sense of Scandinavia, all these different places? What is that place where children are all able to leave school?
For me, I think it starts really early. So you've got to you. it starts at the beginning. So you've got a young child, um, and we seem so obsessed with measuring our children.
Mm.
And I don't know whether you're familiar with a gentleman called Ken Robinson. He's got some
Yeah.
wonderful TED talks and things around education. We put them on this sort of conveyor belt, and we test them and measure them, and we whereas for example, in Scandinavia they don't start formal education till they're 7.
Mm.
It's all very much play-based learning. Uh, Parents are involved very much longer. So there's a secure attachment built right from the start.
Mm.
And from that, I don't know how, if a child doesn't start with a secure attachment, then I kind of feel we're in trouble to start with.
Mm.
Um, so from there, you just build on that. And I think I was reading something yesterday around I think they call it the hidden third,
Mm.
where, just the way our exam system is set up. We can't all pass. So it's set up so a third of the children don't get the GCSE. So, but what are we doing with that third? What are we providing for them? We're not really providing anything from what I can see. The whole narrative is around getting your GCSEs, getting your A levels, and going to university. And anybody else that doesn't fall into that, it's not really. It doesn't seem to be of a great concern to anybody.
It's a really great question that, Ian. And it's something my wife used to say a lot, Michelle, was
Mm,
when you've got a child which is failing at school, what
mm,
they always do, in her experience, was they always blame the child.
yeah.
They never point the fingers back at them. I mean, there's this lovely analogy of when you point at someone, you've got three fingers pointing back at you, you know? And it's like when they point at the child saying, well, you're not good enough, you're stupid, or you didn't put the work in. It's like, well, what's that about you, the person who's
Yeah.
saying this, the system? And I see that,
Mm.
we blame, but rather than going, oh yeah, third, and it's at the
That's a lot
moment,
of kids.
it's a lot of kids, and I believe in this country at the moment, almost a third are below the poverty line in this
Mm,
country, and
mm,
that might be more in the last
mm,
year. But it's
mm.
like, for me, it's like, wow, this is, I think it's one of the worst in in developed countries. You know.
Yeah, maybe I don't know, but yeah, I mean, even if there's lots of countries like this, it's still worth questioning, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Thank you.
it's yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, one of the things which came up as you're saying that about the Scandinavian countries, I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Land and his study through
Um,
NASA.
no.
I got because I trained as a forest school teacher a number of years ago. There's a TED
Ah,
talk with him on it, and I first learned about this in my forest school training. And he was doing tests and had this questionnaire for adults to find out who was a genius. And he said, oh, we could tailor this to find out, use it for children as well. So they tested 4 to 5 year olds and they did 1,600 people for children. How many do you think out of that this is creative genius? How many, what percentage do you feel went on to what they thought would be geniuses?
I think I have. I think I have heard of a similar report or the same report where actually the children were a huge number of them were at genius level creatively, and
Mm.
then you morph them on 10 years, and a tiny percentage of them were at genius level.
Yeah.
Is that the
That's
findings
it.
that
Yeah,
you?
yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
Dr.
yeah,
Land,
yeah,
so he was
yeah.
America. So it was 98% 4 to 5 year olds
Wow,
were genius level. By the
wow.
time they were 10, I think it was down to 30%. By the time they were 15, it was down to 12%. And
Mm,
then they tested it on thousands of adults and it was down to 2% by the time they were in
wow,
adulthood. And it's
wow.
So it's like, what are they doing in between that genius? It's like, oh, they're going to school. And it's, yeah, we can see that,
Yeah,
he talks about this really interesting idea of divergent thinking, which is creative thinking. He says, what I know, I think this is what's happening in schooling is this idea that as soon as we have a creative thought, the inner critic comes in and goes, no, that's stupid. Where he's saying you've got to give space for these divergent thoughts, like, oh, we could do this, we could, which is what 4 and 5-year-olds do. They go, oh, that's a spaceship. But in school, it's like, no, it's not. It's a
yeah,
piece of wood. So
yeah.
we allow that, and what Dr. Land is saying is almost the neuro in the brain. It's almost like the brain is battling each, different parts. So like the neurons are battling each other. So it's like, yeah,
Okay. Wow. Well, I'll have to. I'll have to. It's a TED talk, is it?
it's a TED talk. I'll put it into
Oh,
the description so you
brilliant,
can
brilliant. Oh, lovely.
listen to it. But
Thank you.
so I'd love for us to kind of have a look then. So about your boarding school experience
Mm.
and to understand a little bit about the neurodivergent and just some of the processes and the thought processes you've.
Well, I mean, it's difficult to separate out the two aspects of it, isn't it? Really, because um, you know, George Chavarin always talks about the first day at boarding school,
Mm, mm,
and I don't. I've blocked a lot of what happened for various reasons, but I remember that, and I remember it. Those returns off the summer holidays as well. That up the drive, the click of the cattle grid onto the gravel of the drive, the big imposing house, and um, so that's a difficult place for a child to be anyway. But I think as a kid that's neurodivergent, um, and it's a scary place, isn't it? The smells and the corridor and the polished floors and the formality and the strictness of the place and the weird rules and the dodgy teachers and so it's already a place that it's very easy to sort of lose yourself and dissociate in. Um, then you add in neurodiversity, and my dyslexia runs through my family. I think my dad was dyslexic, um, and various other members of my family are. So it's something that runs, and I mean, I just heard something the other day. It's kind of they described it being like a polar bear, but being dropped into the desert.
mm, mm.
And you've got some abilities that you kind of sense you've got, but they're not really relevant to where you are. Um, and there were some wonderful teachers there. There was a French teacher that his whole classroom was like a. So I went at 11. So his I think I had him for a year, and his whole classroom was like a French village. We all had French names, and we would come into the class, and we'd go shopping, or we'd do, and I mean, considering how difficult I have found learning, I think I learned all the French I know in that one year.
Oh, wow.
As soon as they started to do, conjugated verbs, whatever that is, I mean, that my brain can't even comprehend what that is. I'm gone. I'm lost. I'm just out the window, looking out the window, wondering what the hell's going on. So, that's what I mean. I kind of experiencing something like that. You think, oh, that was such fun. That was such a, and it was just lovely. But most of it wasn't like that. Most of it's just sound lines. Um, I don't know whether I knew I was different, but I think I was lost a lot of the time, just off. Um, and and a couple of other things happened there, which I don't particularly want to go into to here, but it resulted in, some difficult behaviour for the school to manage. I became very aggressive and very. I was just in survival mode and would just lash out, and they had these sort of sort of barbaric ways of trying to control young children. And one springs to mind where they would put you in a black tie, and that would effectively send you to Coventry. No one was allowed, no teachers, no students were allowed to talk to you, and kids wouldn't. They would maybe out in the shower, in the shower or but they would just ignore you, and you were shamed, and but it didn't actually work. It didn't work. It just sort of made you more of an outsider. Again, there was a really quick one. The headmaster there was like a really like former ex-military kind of guy,
Wow.
and he quite fiercely told me to report one day, after loads of all these different ways of trying to control me, to come down to the swimming pool. And the environment in the school made you a little bit nervous around something like that. And I arrived at the school and down to the pool, and I was thinking, what's happening here? But he basically got me in a pool, and he gave me a swimming lesson. And it was really formal. It was very military-like, but there was something deeply caring in his formality. And he did that for multiple weeks, and it was transformative.
Mm.
And I've since become a swim coach.
Right.
I think from that moment, because I didn't understand at the time, but I now understand from my training that the being in the water, the rhythm, the breathing rhythm, the calmness was regulating my nervous system. The kindness, even though it was masked with formality, really touched. And then when I kicked off and got sent to him 2 weeks later, it was just embarrassing, because this guy had shown so much interest and was so kind in his way. And I just sort of thought, that was the contrast between the black tie and the swimming lessons. I was lucky. I was privileged. I was in a place where someone would do that. But there was a swimming pool, and there was a headmaster that could take the time to do that. But yeah, and I think it then at 13 you move on, and I feel like that became again two lots of teachers, the ones that would target the thick kid. I was reasonably big at sort of at that stage. They'd target the big thick kid, scare everybody else, keep control. So they would one guy would always get you round doing the reading thing, where you go around and read, and that was just I could see it on his face. He just was, yeah. But then you had other people, amazing PE teachers that sport. I know sport was a big thing in your life, Piers, and it certainly got me through school. And they got me helping with the younger kids. I think I was like 15. I started helping coaching the younger kids. I had a wonderful housemaster who, could see the teachers ganging up on me and creating me as the scapegoat. And he stuck up for me and started to give me some responsibility, and found different ways for me to be myself and excel. And those two threads of kind of what I've tried to take into when I get the privilege of working with young people now.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah, I love what you just said. The privilege of working with young people, I think, generally is education. We don't necessarily see it as a privilege. A lot, some teachers definitely, and a lot, it's we're not seeing it as a privilege. We see it as
Mm.
a hassle or a job. And it's interesting as you're talking about Coventry. I've spoken to Karen Wilson a couple of months ago, who wrote the book
Mm.
Atrocious Behaviour.
Yeah,
He was
yeah.
sent to Coventry, and also Mark Stauffer, who did the documentary about the Dilworth boarding school in New Zealand. And he talks about how he was sent to Coventry. That's what they would often do. Just seems like one of the most cruel, as I was reading Karen Wilson's book, I'm like, this just felt like something out of almost a Second World War, prisoner of war camp.
Mm.
The cruelty of these teachers, these matrons,
Yeah,
and I see that. It's like,
yeah.
and my wife was dyslexic, and she said, she was just considered thick,
Mm.
not concentrating, dreaming, and yet she was a genius. And so many, the people like Richard Branson or the Steve Jobs, they were dyslexic,
Yeah, yeah.
and then they weren't stupid. And yet the modern education system said, well, yeah, Branson left age 15, 16 from Stowe. So, yeah. So
Mm.
I guess I'd love for us to explore a bit more about neurodivergent, about,
Yeah.
in a boarding school,
Mm.
you know, I mean, you mentioned about attachment, but yeah, I'd love you to explore a little bit more about what what was missing and because I know there's quite a lot of people who are neurodivergent,
Mm.
and again, it was that blame. The blame was on them. They were stupid. They were slow.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
how was that for you?
Mm. Oh, I mean, it's just unbelievably damaging, isn't it? To um, if you're told you're stupid constantly,
Mhm.
you're going to believe it.
Yeah.
And so you then end up leaving school. Uh, you've got this wonderful, privileged boarding school confidence, but deep down you're just like, you're stupid.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I think that's a bit dramatic. I feel there was enough good people to show me that there was something, and it was just a case of finding that something. But it was never. There was not really academically. There was not a light shone on it. There was no place. There was no place to shine academically. So the academics is the clever bit, isn't it?
Mhm.
The sport and that is a side bit. But actually, all the learning from those bits and the other bits were just as valid. Um, and yeah, I think being a dyslexic kid in any school environment is a challenge.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if you then add boarding school into it as well, you kind of, yeah, it's because I think the the dyslexia being in that environment, it basically comes down to disassociation because you just travel down through that moment of shame. Someone's going around, the teacher targets you to read. It's coming round to you. You can see there's 4 more people to go, and you start to sweat. You start to feel it. You start to shut down.
Mm-hmm.
and it gets round to two and then one, and then it's you. By the time it gets to you, you're so shut down. Even if you could read it, you're so far you're just in fight or flight, or you're where you can't really fight in that situation, so you just dissociate. And you just and then in my case, if someone were to say something afterwards, then fight or flight would definitely come,
Mm-hmm.
which I look back with some shame as well, because I was pretty aggressive at some points, um, and um, yeah, so yeah, I think, and then I mean, again, Joy, I love Joy's work. She talks about the ABCD, and that we end up at dissociation there. So
Mm-hmm.
you got double dissociation,
Yeah.
and yeah, I must tell you, Piers, I did a really lovely session with some primary school kids a few years back, and we did a group. It was 6 kids,
Mm-hmm.
um, and they were two 11-year-olds, two 10-year-olds, two 9-year-olds, because I love the idea of mixed age groups,
Mm-hmm.
mixed gender, um, and they were all neurodivergent in some way or the other. We had a little sit round to start with, and we had a little round robin going round chatting about it. And I asked them to um, tell me something they were really good at. And there was lots of looking at the floor and no one could come up with anything. So I sort of said to them, well, shall I start then?
Mm-hmm.
And I started and I said, I'm really, really, really good at daydreaming. And this flutter went round the kids and they just relaxed
Mm-hmm.
because they were like, oh, we can daydream here.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, and then I think we were like 3 weeks in, it was like an hour a week and for a few weeks. And we were like 3 weeks in and I was sat in the dining room and I was watching the kids that I was working with. And there was one girl who was probably 10 or 11, and they were organizing the children to go from the dining room. And they were doing this thing where the quietest table goes first, which I get, you've got 100 kids, you've got to get them out somehow. But it was, um, it brought something for me, the way that was being done. But, and I looked at this little girl and she was sat there and she was gone. She was completely gone. And it got to her table and she missed and she was just, oh, off she went. And and we'd formed quite a good relationship, already. So I went up to her after and said, "Oh, I noticed you had a little daydream. What was going on for you?" And she went into how difficult it was to keep control of the children that were there,
Mm-hmm.
what was going on for the teacher, why she actually found that quite nervous to do, and you could tell that she was a bit nervous and that she's got a lot going on. She went into why someone was black messing around. She got it all sussed
Yeah.
on such a deep level.
Yeah.
But 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 she was the kid that was struggling at school.
It's like, yes, that genius again. And the daydreaming, that's a big point of divergent thinking, is that
Yeah, this is exactly what you were
creativity.
talking about earlier.
Yeah. And I was
Yeah.
reading some research over the weekend by Emma Seppala in her book, The Happiness Track. She was at Stanford University at the time, and they did, I think it was IBM in 2010, I think it was 1,500 CEOs, and they asked them what is the most important quality in in business, and they said it's creativity. And
Um,
yet we spend very little time. I certainly have heard many schools cutting arts, cutting all of these different things, and yet CEOs of top companies are saying
Mm.
creativity is the number one skill, and this girl has it in aces. She's genius that she
Well,
can manage but considered by the system, it's not the case.
she ended up. Actually, no, I'm not going to say anything else more because it might identify the girl. But yeah,
Mm.
um, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And
yeah,
the kind of another thing, neuroscience, I think it's Bessel van der Kolk, the psychiatrist, who says when we go into freeze,
yeah,
there's no neural activity. So if we're put
yeah,
under so much pressure, and it's like that idea of fear, certainly for me, and my experience at boarding school is that was the one of the key experiences was fear.
yeah,
And many people have fed back, oh yeah, 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 definitely. It was a very frightening environment. Well, there's very little neural activity. So you're going to really struggle. You've got to be relaxed. It's a bit like Joy says in her book, Boarding School Syndrome, the idea of you've got to be relaxed when you're eating. It's usually three or four people, not eight, 900. That was how many were eating at the same time when I was at school. And I've
yeah.
heard of
Wow.
people who never went into the dining hall. They would hide and, they were anorexic because they couldn't handle that stressful environment.
Yeah, yeah,
So, yeah, just
yeah,
makes sense.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
It does.
so I'd love for us to segue a little bit, Ian, into adverse school experiences. Maybe begin with
Yeah,
adverse childhood experiences,
yeah.
but just
Okay. So I first came across adverse childhood experiences when I was volunteering a few years ago in a charity that worked with children who were struggling with suicidal thoughts. So it was a really intense place to volunteer.
mm,
And they used the adverse childhood experiences to try and understand the background of the children. And I now use it a lot. They originally, I think the study was in the late, it was in 1998 or something. I think it came out, and they studied, they came up with 10 experiences, adverse experiences, and they saw tested a large group of people and tested the outcome of that of what would happen with these people. And I kind of I think I think you talked about it, Piers, where
yeah.
actually if you think about it from then a boarding point of view,
Mm,
so for example, you could give a boarder a set of 10 questions, the adverse childhood experiences, and they might have two or three,
yes.
which is already quite a lot.
Mm,
If you change a few things,
mm,
like instead of your parent being an alcoholic, was your housemaster an alcoholic?
mm,
Um, you know, all of a sudden you go from two or three to seven,
yeah.
and that's huge.
Yeah.
It's just it really struck me as wow, this really says a lot about what you're talking about all the time, Piers, and you campaigning for. But what it didn't strike me is that it didn't actually address the stuff that I've just been talking about the actual school experiences.
Mm,
Because again, it was the original ACEs were very much about what was happening at home, what was happening, in the but it didn't give any language to what the school was doing.
mm,
And I've
mm,
got, I mean, I want to qualify this. I've got a lot of friends who are teachers, and they're wonderful, genuine people, and I don't want to give an impression at all, be any accusations around people that are working because they're wonderful people, but the system is structured in a way that there are specific things that are happening in schools that are damaging to children.
mm,
And I've Googled this a lot, and I've not really come up. found much around this, but I was really happy to hear, Piers, that you spoke to somebody recently about this, and there is some research being done around this.
Not
Um,
yet, but
Not
it's
yet.
kind of so there's been trauma informed looks at schools, studies being
Absolutely.
done into that,
Absolutely.
and this idea of certainly linking boarding schools into doing like an to actually do a proper clinical study of
Mm.
well, what are the the ASEs, the adverse school experiences, rather than the adverse childhood experiences. And I
Yeah.
think because you're so right, and it's really fascinating. This is something I've just been thinking of over the last couple of years. I've mentioned this many times on the podcast, but this idea that if you are an expat,
Yeah.
you are not resident in the UK, and it's changed slightly recently, but you're not resident. If you stay in the UK for more than 3 months, you then become a resident. But if under you're considered an expat, you don't have to pay tax. You can still come and visit. But as soon as you step over that 3 month fresh threshold, you become a resident and everything
Right.
changes. We were at home less than 3 months, most of us. So we weren't residents. So as soon as you say, was your parent an alcoholic? Well, your parent was actually the housemaster.
Exactly. Exactly.
They weren't the people. So when people say, "Oh, I had a lovely home life," it's like, yeah, but you weren't resident there. You were an expat of home of your own country, and actually, suddenly, when it says like the ACE studies, it says, "Did you see anyone, one of your family members being hit?" Well, essentially, your classmates or your people in your
Absolutely.
house, they
Yeah.
are now your siblings. Did you see them being hit? Of course. I mean, nearly every single book I have, biography, is of people being beaten, smacked, hit. It's like that's the common denominator. Certainly, well, even the female ones, listening to reading Karen Wilson's. Again, she was hit. I was reading some of the stories from the the brilliant book by Nikki Moxie, Linda Devereaux, talking about ACEs and third culture
Mm.
kids. Again, girls being hit there.
Yeah.
It's like, did you see anyone being hit?
Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
suddenly, like you say, it goes from two or three
Yeah.
up to 7 or 8. So yes,
Yeah.
I. So what's your
Yeah.
sense with that? What needs to happen? What was your um
Well, I think so if we want to look at education and we want to say, okay, so let's start with what harms children.
mm, mm,
So let's look at what harms children. So let's take uh, early assessments of children, for example. So if we look at an early assessment of children, is that harmful or is that good?
mm,
And for me, it doesn't sound great. The earlier you start measuring a child in a to conform down a very narrow path, the more you're cutting down their options, the more you're creating shame. Um, and if they're coming from a situation where they've not had a secure attachment through their early years of their schooling, then, I mean, maybe we start with that. Well, question one is, have you had a secure attachment in your
mm,
transition from your home to your nursery? Have you had a secure attachment in the transition from your nursery into your school? Maybe that's what number one.
mm,
I've got about 40 lists, 40 different lists. So, it kind of it depends which angle you want to take it from. But it's that for me start. And then obviously the other end of the list is, were you in an institution?
mm, mm, mm,
Um, and you see, for me, it's like, let's look at a list of things that do damage, and it's a big cultural change.
Mm, mm,
It's a
mm,
huge cultural change, and people have been talking about this for 30 years, and nothing's happened. Small things are happening.
mm, mm,
Small things. I did a wonderful course a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago actually, with a lovely lady in Scotland called Nikki Shaw,
mm,
and
mm.
she is training people in early years all around attachment, and it was amazing. It was an amazing course. It was just so moving. I just was like, wow. So there is stuff happening, but it's such a, and I mean, we've got to touch on who controls the policies around education, haven't we really? You know, and it's
Mm.
probably a bunch of ex-boarders.
Well, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
what are.
Yeah, and that's it. And I think the more I'm seeing is like it's just we have to have that vision. I think that's key for all of us. I love what Simon Partridge said when I interviewed him, this idea of when we've worked on our stuff quite a bit, then we almost return to the world, as Joseph Campbell says, this idea of you return the hero's journey with the boon. And it's almost like, right, what can we now give? And I get that sense with there's so many amazing ex-boarders and people who've been through trauma. And it's like, I feel it's an unstoppable wave now.
I hope
It's
so.
100%. And I believe that's what we have to really have deep inside ourselves, that change is going to happen, that certainty, and then we
Mm,
will do whatever it takes for that to happen. Because essentially, children aren't safe in this country at the moment.
mm,
And, we can see that with the grooming scandals, with all of the sexual abuse. It's like they're not safe, and therefore we can do something about it in
mm.
whichever way, whether it's writing to our MP, whatever, we can do something. And it's having
Yeah,
that clear vision that in a few years we'll live in a world where children are safe. And I really get that sense. And what you're saying about this lady, Nikki Shaw, yeah, Suzanne Zedek, these people who are doing amazing work, their
yeah.
work will just grow. And we're going, I think it would be market led.
I hope so because if enough of us have got this on, and social media, whatever we think of it, there's you know, you wouldn't be surprised my social media is packed with all this stuff. So- and there's a lot of people talking about this. I know,
Mm.
it narrows you down, doesn't it? It just targets you with stuff you like, but
Yeah.
um, and it's as I said before we came on, I've recently become a granddad, and
Mm.
you know, I love my granddaughter to have a really lovely, nurturing start and
Mm.
progress through life. It would be such a dream.
Mm, beautiful. And that's it. That's what we have to do is just have that vision, even if it's one person. And it,
Mm,
it can happen. I think
mm.
I think one of the things in the UK, we've been told we're powerless. Those who are in charge have the power. And I see
Yeah.
that no, it's changing. The inverse is
Mm,
happening. It's the
mm.
people in the
And it can
ground.
it can start it can start with the again. There's a wonderful forest school just up the road from me here, and it's just beautiful. It's the kids all come, and there's this like pile of logs that are all wiggly wobbly with great big gaps down them. And there's these 3-year-olds climbing them with such confidence, and wonderful staff round the fire cooking, and kid needs a cuddle, and they just come and sit with them. It's just beautiful, and it's you've literally got them to get in there. You've got to have them signed up when you're pregnant.
Really.
It's that popular.
Wow.
Um, so there's a lot, as you say, Piers. I flip between being like a bit disheartened to being really optimistic.
Yeah, and I think I used to, and now it's like that certainty moving back in to that
Mm,
certainty with things which will change.
Mm.
and as you know, we've got a screening of the documentary in a few
Yeah,
months. So we not publicized yet, but we will publicize this week. And it's like when we have that vision, then the doors open and it's
yeah,
that certainty. And I think it's
yeah,
really noting that optimism when we can get into that space, anything is possible. And
yeah,
I really
yeah.
see that it's
Mm.
really exciting if we can
Mm.
stay in that. Doesn't matter what happens. It's like, nope, it's gonna
Mm.
unfold.
And also, it's worth mentioning as well, Piers, that boarding has changed.
100%.
Boarding has changed, and it's changed because of pressure from
Mm.
people like you and people who have been talking about this for a long time. And it has changed. It's a different place. The children are still separated from their parents. They haven't. They're broken. Their attachments are broken. Which, you know, yeah. Well, you know, it's just
Yeah.
so. It seems to me so blatantly obvious that it's wrong. But they have changed. So there is change happening.
Mm. Mm.
Um, I mean, it's flipping back a little bit the other way. I feel where because of they're struggling for people, so they're having to reach their net further afield, abroad and to different places. So our local prep school had barely any boarding up until recently, and they're now pushing the boarding more because they need the bums on seats,
Mm.
um, and that's sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And I was just thinking about that with a lot of you know, put their net further afield. They're getting a lot
Mm,
of people from Asia and Africa, as the work of Nikki Moxie and Linda Devereux, they're third culture kids, so they're losing
mm,
not only their family and all of but also their culture.
yeah,
And what they've shown in their research is these are often the most damaged people, most
yeah,
damaged by it because they've lost,
mm,
everything.
mm.
So,
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, because did you have we had kids from abroad in my school, and it was another level of you know the lad from Vietnam just got well, I'm not going to say what he was called, but he was assumed
mhm,
to be Chinese by everybody, and when he pointed it out, it was just a wonderful wind up to call him Chinese. It was just like
mhm. Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
savage. Mm,
yeah,
mm,
it
mm,
is.
mm.
So, I mean, we've talked about, dissociation, adverse kind of school experiences.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd love for us to look at kind of what are the Scandinavian schools doing, please, Ian?
Well, again, I've not been to Scandinavia and seen it for myself, but I've been reading a lot about it. And the bits that really strike me are they start right from the start. Child's born, both the mum and the dad have extended periods of leave. And from what I understand, they can mix it a bit. So they can both be off for a bit. Dad can go back to work for a bit. Mum stays looking after this. They have amazing in every town. They have areas of mini little forest areas with things the kids can climb over. They sometimes have people staffing it who can talk to the kids around what it is, and they kind of it's the there's education going on in these places, and it's a place that it's free. Parents can gather. Nurseries can book it for the day and come to these places, um, and there's a support for the mothers and the fathers, and then maybe the father comes and he takes his turn, and the mum might go back to work. And I just saw a wonderful podcast the other day on the latte dads, where there's all these Scandinavian dads out with their kids, sitting in the cafes, and I just thought, wow, amazing. They then move on into their schools, um, and the name has gone out of my head. Classic dyslexic moment, but there's basically this thing where kids, um, they'll be with their caregiver, and they'll go off and explore for a bit, and then they'll come back and they'll sit with a caregiver, and they'll get their strength back, and they'll go back off again. So this is what happens to start with in the schools there, from what I understand. The parents come, and the child gradually gets used to the environment. There's none of this sort of leaving them at the door into this strange world. And then they build these bonds with these. I'm painting a very idealistic view here, but this is my leave me in my idyll. And and then the the ratios of carers to children is much smaller. It's generally outside all weathers. They're in the forest. They're playing. That carries on until they're 6 or 7. There's
Mm.
no formal education. There's no measuring. There's no testing, even in school. I think it starts around 15. They have like maybe an exam or some sort of test of. And if you're neurodivergent, there's a team of people that will help you navigate it. And um, yeah, so I'm sure it's got its flaws.
Mm. Mm.
I'm sure
Yeah.
there are things that are wrong, and maybe their society is a very different structure and it's much smaller. So, but it feels like it's worth holding up as exploring that as an option.
Yeah. Um, this was the interesting thing. I had a conversation at the boarding school concern conference
Yeah,
with a lady, a psychotherapist, and she's saying if you ask someone about boarding schools, who's an advocate, they'll tell you all of the great things. And then you just say, well, what are the negatives? And they say, well, there aren't any. And what you've just said there is, yes, they've got some really great things, but there'll be some downsides. It's
yeah,
just a given for anything that we
yeah,
do. If
yeah,
we buy a Tesla, it's like, well, there's the positives, well, the negatives, well, it's quite expensive, there's the negative. Whereas with boarding school, the advocates say, oh, it's all these good things. Well, what are the negatives? And
yeah,
we obviously know what the negatives are, but they're never talked about.
yeah,
And especially in the prospectus, well, you'll probably have to spend £10,000 on psychotherapy. You'll, you know, you've
a
broken attachment, you'll struggle with relationships, you'll struggle
couple of
probably with
marriages.
addictions. Couple, these things that are like, oh, that's the negative. Not for everyone,
Yeah,
but the same with the Scandinavian model. There's going
yeah,
to be the upsides and the downsides. But
yeah,
that's a given. And I think we need to, this is what the work we're all doing is bringing to light. Well, these are the other side of
yeah. And
the
so
negative.
the adverse school experience then become the you know early separation from your parents,
Mm,
the early no attachment with um, your caregivers at nursery, and it just carries on. And I feel like though that's a really good way of framing these adverse childhood experiences
mm.
with the boarding thing right at the top of the list.
Yeah, yeah, great,
Mm.
great. And I think, you know, it's just for me, I think that's the next step is like to do some studies, some clinical studies, because
Absolutely.
people say, why do you choose to send the child at 8? They don't have data why
No.
they should send. And if we can just go, well, scientifically, this is this meta-analysis of all this data of all these people who've been to boarding school. These are how many who have addictions, etc., struggle with mental health, and these are how many adverse school experiences they've had.
Yeah.
And suddenly you have data, and I think then it'd be like, well,
Yeah. Yeah.
and this is the impact. So I'd love for us to. Are there any things that you really wanted to talk about today that maybe you haven't yet, or you feel you've listened to the podcast a bit that maybe I've not talked about, or my guests haven't spoken about that would be just really important to speak about?
I mean, I think I'd really like to acknowledge here is that it's very often somebody. with a PhD in education that is talking about education and is explaining why people like me might struggle. And I am very grateful that one of the hidden thirds has got to sort of put it across from what it feels like to be one of those people. And I really want to notice as well that the two of us have very different styles. I'm so jealous, Piers, of your ability to retain information and books and quotes. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'd love to be able to do that.
I'll
But,
teach you how
but,
to do it. I had to learn because I was in the dyslexic class at school for a while.
were you? Oh, well,
Yeah,
Piers, you're going to have to give me a crash course.
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, but what's so lovely? I'm behind you on that, but we have a great conversation, and we've got a lot of the same passions and a lot of the same interests, and it's just wonderful.
Mm,
Yeah,
Well, bless you for doing this work and exploring this because I think the more voices there can be out there, knowing that change is happening
yeah,
and it's going to happen,
yeah,
and it's like I feel it. It's a tide. It's
yeah,
turned, and it's
yeah,
unstoppable. It really feels
yeah.
like that, and it's
Uh,
so uplifting.
yeah, I agree, Piers. And I think, like, on the boarding school thing, I've just finished training as a therapist, and in the 4 years I was doing that, I was with over 30 students.
Mhm.
And when I first started talking about boarding, they just looked at me as I was mad. They just couldn't see what I was going on about. But there's 30 or 40 therapists that are fully aware around the problems around boarding that are now filtering out into the world.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to the college about going back and doing some CPDs for the current group of students around boarding. And
Mhm.
so just feels like these little things
Yeah.
are building the tide. Yeah,
Yeah. Amazing. That's a great idea. Doing some CPD days for around boarding for the therapists. Because,
yeah,
yeah, most people, it's still that thing. Oh, you're really lucky to have gone to boarding school,
yeah,
or it was a real privilege.
yeah.
You know?
I mean,
And
the aim of the CBT thing is just the CBT is just to sort of to put it on the radar.
mm,
And maybe if they're really interesting, they can go do Nick Duffers courses on the therapist. But this is just like this is a thing, and you
mhm,
need to be aware of it because this
mm,
guy that comes into your room looking very competent, very very guarded, and very clever, there may be something underneath it. And
mhm.
if you're aware of it, then there's a chance.
Yeah, 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 definitely. Wow,
Mm,
amazing, amazing.
mm.
So as we start wrapping up,
Yeah.
any last thing you'd love to share with my audience?
Ah. You know what, Piers? I think we've had a great little scoot round it all.
We have, we have. It's been, yeah,
Yeah.
fascinating. Thank you
I
so
mean,
much.
I've got pages of notes here. We could go for another 4 hours. But
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think sometimes when I'm doing stuff, I'm like my videos on the Wednesday. I'm like,
yeah.
I really just could talk and talk, and it'd be like 1,000 threads. And I'm like, no, that I'm already going up to 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And it's like, no, just stop here.
Mm.
So, yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. And is there
Great pleasure,
somewhere
Piers.
people can reach out to you? Do you have a website?
Yeah, I do have a website. It's kind of in the process of being set up, but there's enough information on there about me as a therapist and just putting something out around the adverse school experiences, and I'd be really interested to hear if anybody's got any thoughts around that, and I'd be really interested to hear about any research that might be happening. So if anybody's would like to reach out and let me know that, I'd love to hear about it.
Thank you. Thank you. If you give me your website address, I'll put it into the description and then people
Perfect,
can
perfect.
reach out. But thank you. It's been a real pleasure. And yeah,
Absolute
really
pleasure, Piers.
appreciate your
Thank you,
conversation.
thank you.
Okay. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye now, bye now.